She stood before the mirror, deliberately smudging ash across her cheeks, tangling her hair into knots. Clara Whitmore had perfected the art of making herself invisible, because in a world that demanded women be ornamental and silent, invisibility was survival. But tonight, fate had other plans. The man she'd loved in secret for 3 agonizing years, Duke Adrian Blackthorne, untouchable, devastating, and entirely out of reach, was about to see her at her absolute worst. And somehow, that disaster would become the beginning of everything. Stay until the end to see how one woman's refusal to play by society's rules burned down every expectation and rebuilt an entire world. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see who's watching. Chum. Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the fireplace ash. Not from fear. She'd burned through fear years ago, somewhere between her second failed season and the night she'd overheard Lady Pemberton describe her as tragically unmarriageable. No, her hands shook from something closer to fury, or maybe exhaustion, the kind that settled into your bones after years of being exactly what they wanted you to be, only to discover it would never be enough. The ballroom downstairs hummed with music and laughter, another glittering event at the Ashford estate, another evening of watching eligible men's eyes slide past her like she was furniture. At 26, Clara had aged out of the marriage market entirely. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. "Miss Whitmore?" Her maid's voice drifted through the door. "They're asking for you downstairs." "Tell them I've taken ill," Clara called back, dragging ash across her cheekbone. It left a gray smear that looked almost like a bruise. Perfect. She surveyed her reflection with grim satisfaction, hair tangled and falling from its pins. Face smudged, the carefully pressed gown now deliberately wrinkled. She looked exactly like what polite society feared most. A woman who'd stopped trying. Because that's what she'd done, hadn't she? Stopped trying to shrink herself, to laugh at unfunny jokes, to pretend she didn't understand Latin or mathematics or anything that might threaten a man's delicate ego. Stopped trying to be the vapid, decorative thing they demanded. Her mother had warned her. "You're too clever by half, Clara. Men don't want clever, they want agreeable." Well, Clara had tried agreeable. For years she'd bitten her tongue, bloody trying. And where had it gotten her? Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So tonight, faced with yet another gathering where she'd be paraded like livestock and found wanting, Clara had decided to take control of the only thing she could, how spectacularly she'd fail. She was halfway to the door when it burst open. "Clara Whitmore, what in heaven's name?" Her cousin Beatrice stopped dead, eyes widening. "What happened to you?" "Nothing happened. I'm simply not attending tonight." "Not attending? But the Duke of Blackthorne is here." Clara's heart stuttered. "Adrian, here!" She recovered quickly, turning away to hide whatever her face might reveal. "All the more reason to stay away." "Are you mad?" Beatrice rushed forward, grabbing Clara's shoulders. "Do you know how many women would kill for this chance? The Duke never attends these provincial gatherings. Mother heard he's under pressure from the Queen herself to finally choose a bride. This could be..." "Could be what?" Clara spun around, something sharp and reckless rising in her chest. "Could be my chance to humiliate myself in front of the one man whose opinion I actually..." She caught herself. Barely. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Whose opinion you what?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter." Clara pulled free, moving toward the window. Outside, carriages lined the circular drive, their lanterns casting dancing shadows. "He won't choose someone like me anyway. He needs a proper duchess, someone beautiful and accomplished, and you are accomplished." "I'm accomplished in all the wrong ways." Clara laughed, but it came out bitter. "I can read Greek. I understand agricultural reform. I have opinions about trade policy and land management and a dozen other things that make me fundamentally unsuitable for polite company." "That's not..." "It is." Clara turned back to face her cousin. "You know it is. I've watched it happen for 8 years, Bea. Every man who shows initial interest, every potential suitor, the moment they realize I actually think, actually have a mind beyond needlework and gossip, they flee. So forgive me if I'd rather spare myself the indignity of watching the Duke's eyes glaze over when I accidentally say something intelligent." Beatrice opened her mouth, closed it. For once, she had no response. Because they both knew Clara was right. "Just tell them I'm ill," Clara said quietly. Please. Her cousin hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But you're making a mistake. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Clara sank onto the window seat, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, more guests arrived. She could hear the swell of voices, see the glow of the ballroom chandeliers painting everything gold. And somewhere in that golden light was Adrian Blackthorne. She'd been 17 when she first saw him. He'd been 24, newly titled after his father's death, and so devastatingly handsome it had hurt to look at him. But it wasn't his looks that had captured her. It was the moment during a political dinner when he'd defended increased funding for public schools, citing specific literacy statistics and economic benefits, while the other men sputtered about tradition and the natural order. He'd been brilliant, passionate, unafraid to argue his position even when it made him unpopular. And Clara had fallen completely, hopelessly in love. Not that it mattered. Men like Adrian Blackthorne didn't marry women like her. They married diamonds of the first water, women who looked perfect on their arms and knew better than to challenge them in public. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. I said I wasn't coming down, Clara called out, not bothering to hide her irritation. And here I thought you might reconsider if I asked personally. Clara froze. That voice, low, amused, achingly familiar. No, 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 no. She turned slowly, heart hammering, to find Adrian Blackthorne standing in her doorway. He looked the same, yet different. Still tall, still dark-haired with those piercing gray eyes that seemed to see through everything. But there were new lines around his mouth, a harder set to his jaw. 3 years had changed him from devastating to something more dangerous, something that made her chest tight and her thoughts scatter. Your Grace. She stood quickly, trying to angle her face away from the lamplight, trying to hide the ash, the tangled hair, the complete disaster of her appearance. I apologize. I'm not feeling well. I was just destroying your own reflection. He stepped into the room uninvited, and Clara's breath caught at the impropriety of it. A man in her chambers, alone. If anyone saw... That's an interesting approach to illness. Heat flooded her face. I don't know what you mean. No? He moved closer, and she caught the scent of him, sandalwood and something crisp, like winter air. So the ash on your face is purely coincidental? There was a candle. You're a terrible liar, Clara Whitmore. The sound of her name in his mouth did something dangerous to her equilibrium. You remember me. Of course I remember you. He said it like it was obvious, like 3 years of silence and distance meant nothing. You're the woman who once spent an entire dinner party explaining to Lord Hertford why his position on the Corn Laws would devastate tenant farmers, complete with mathematical projections. Clara's mouth fell open. You remember that? I remember thinking it was the most magnificent thing I'd seen in years. His eyes held hers, intent and focused in a way that made her feel pinned. Hertford was an pompous fool, and you dismantled him so politely he didn't even realize he'd been destroyed until dessert. He complained to my mother. Said I was too forward. He was threatened. Adrian took another step closer. Most men are. When confronted with intelligence, they can't match. And you? The words escaped before she could stop them. Are you threatened? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. By you? Absolutely. The honesty of it stunned her into silence. So, he continued, his tone shifting to something lighter, are you going to tell me why you're hiding in your room looking like you survived a chimney fire? Or shall I guess? Clara's fingers twisted in her skirt. I wasn't hiding. No? I was... She trailed off, searching for a plausible lie and finding none. Yes, fine. I was hiding. From what? From that. She gestured toward the window, toward the ballroom below. From all of it. The performance, the pretending, the desperate parade of eligibility. I'm tired of it. So you sabotaged yourself. So I took control of the only thing I could control, the inevitable failure. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then, to her complete shock, he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh, genuine and surprised. What's funny? Clara demanded, torn between offense and confusion. You. He shook his head, still smiling. You're hiding from success by ensuring failure. It's brilliant and completely insane. It's practical. It's terrified. The word hit like a slap. I am not. You are. He moved closer still, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're so afraid of being rejected for who you really are that you've decided to reject yourself first. To make the choice before anyone else can. Clara's throat tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? His voice dropped lower. Tell me something, Clara. When was the last time you walked into a room as yourself? Not smaller, not quieter, not apologizing for taking up space. Just yourself. She couldn't answer, because the truth was, she couldn't remember. That's what I thought. Adrian reached out, and Clara's breath stopped as his fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a smudge of ash. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and it made something crack open inside her chest. You've spent so long trying to disappear that you've forgotten you're allowed to be seen. Being seen hasn't exactly worked out well for me, Clara whispered, because you've been letting the wrong people look. His thumb traced along her jawline, and she shivered despite herself. Come downstairs with me. What? Come downstairs, just as you are. Clara pulled back, shaking her head rapidly. Absolutely not. I look like a disaster. People will talk. They'll talk anyway. Adrian's hand fell away, but his eyes never left hers. They've been talking about you for years, haven't they? About how you're too smart, too opinionated, too unmarriageable. So what's the difference? The difference is I'd be giving them ammunition. Or you'd be showing them you don't care about their ammunition anymore. He tilted his head, studying her. What are you really afraid of, Clara? I'm not. What are you afraid of? The question hung between them, sharp and inescapable. That you'll see me, Clara finally admitted, the words scraping out of her throat. Really see me. All the parts I've tried so hard to hide, all the things that make me fundamentally wrong for your world. And you'll realize everyone else was right. That I'm not enough. That I was never going to be enough. The silence after felt enormous. Then Adrian spoke, his voice rough. What if I've been seeing you all along? Clara's head snapped up. What if, he continued, taking a step toward her, I've spent 3 years trying to forget the way you looked when you argued about agricultural reform? The passion in your voice when you defended education funding? What if the reason I've avoided these gatherings is because I knew you'd be at them, and I wasn't sure I could trust myself to stay away? Her heart was going to explode. You're lying. I've never lied to you. You barely know me. I know you better than you think. His expression turned serious. I know you bite your tongue when men say ignorant things at dinner. I know you pretend not to understand topics you've studied extensively. I know you make yourself smaller every single day, and it kills something in you each time you do it. How? Because I've been watching. The confession came out quiet, but certain. For 3 years, Clara, every gathering we've both attended, every dinner party, every ball, I've watched you dim your own light, and it's driven me half mad. Clara couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Why didn't you say anything? Because you weren't ready. Adrian's jaw tightened. You were still trying to be what they wanted, and I needed you to be done with that, to be ready to burn it all down. And you think I'm ready now? I think you were ready the moment you put ash on your face and decided to hide. His eyes blazed with something fierce and uncompromising. You were done pretending. You just hadn't realized it yet. Clara's hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fury or exhaustion. It was from the sudden, terrifying possibility that maybe, she didn't have to keep breaking herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. What if I come downstairs and it's a disaster? She asked, hating how vulnerable she sounded. Then it's a disaster. Adrian shrugged, but at least it'll be an honest one. That's not comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. He held out his hand. I'm trying to challenge you. To see if you're brave enough to stop hiding. Clara stared at his outstretched palm. It would be so easy to refuse, to send him away, to lock herself in this room and avoid the whole mess, to keep herself safe in the familiar misery of invisibility. But something in her, some reckless, exhausted, desperate part, was so damn tired of safe. If I do this, she said slowly, if I go down there looking like this, people will talk. They'll say terrible things. About me. About you for being associated with me. Let them. Your reputation. My reputation can survive. Adrian's hand remained steady between them. The question is, can yours? Clara laughed, sharp and surprised. I don't have a reputation to protect anymore. That's rather the point. Then what's stopping you? Everything. Nothing. Fear and possibility tangled so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. She looked at his hand again. Strong fingers, calloused in ways that suggested he did more than sign papers and attend balls. A hand that had reached for her when everyone else had looked away. Clara took a breath, then another. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she placed her palm in his. Adrian's fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and something locked into place. Something that felt dangerously like fate. There you are, he murmured, and Clara wasn't sure if he meant her hand or something deeper. They stood there for a moment, hands joined, the weight of the choice settling over them both. Downstairs, music swelled. Voices rose and fell. The glittering machine of high society churned on, unaware that something fundamental was about to shift. I can't believe I'm doing this, Clara whispered. Neither can I. But Adrian was smiling. Ready? Absolutely not. Perfect. He tugged her toward the door. That's when we're most alive. They stepped into the hallway and Clara's stomach twisted with nerves. Her free hand went to her hair, trying uselessly to smooth it. Adrian caught her wrist. Don't. I look like I lost a fight with a dust storm. You look real. His eyes held hers. And that's infinitely more interesting than perfect. They descended the stairs together. With each step, Clara felt the weight of what she was doing settle deeper. She was walking into a room full of people who'd already dismissed her, but this time she wasn't pretending to be smaller. She wasn't apologizing. She was just there, visible, undeniable, terrifying. The ballroom doors loomed ahead, golden light spilling through the gap. Clara could hear the orchestra, the laughter, the clink of glasses. Her entire body tensed. Clara, Adrian's voice pulled her back. Look at me. She did. Whatever happens in there, he said quietly, you're not alone. Do you understand? No, she didn't understand. Didn't understand why he was doing this, why he cared, why he'd been watching her for 3 years without saying anything. But the certainty in his voice steadied something inside her. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Adrian pushed open the doors. The ballroom spread before them in a wash of gold and crystal. Hundreds of candles blazed in chandeliers overhead. Women in silk gowns spun across the marble floor. Men clustered in groups discussing politics and business over brandy. Everything was beautiful, polished, perfect. And then Clara Whitmore walked in. The effect was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Dancers stumbled. Every head turned toward the entrance, eyes widening as they took in her disheveled hair, ash-smudged face, wrinkled gown, and the Duke of Blackthorn's hand wrapped around hers. The silence stretched, broken only by the orchestra trailing off in confused discord. Clara felt the weight of every stare, heard the rustle of fans snapping open, saw the shock and contempt rippling through the crowd. Her first instinct was to run, to tear her hand from Adrian's and flee back to the safety of her room, back to invisibility and isolation. But then Adrian's fingers tightened around hers, not pulling her forward, not forcing her, just reminding her he was there. And Clara realized something that changed everything. She'd already survived years of their judgment, years of being found wanting, of being dismissed, of being nothing in their eyes. What did she have to lose by finally being seen as herself? She lifted her chin. Somewhere in the crowd, Lady Pemberton gasped. Good heavens, is that Clara Whitmore? Someone else finished, scandalized. What on earth happened to her? And with the Duke? Someone should intervene. This is highly improper. But no one moved. They just stared, transfixed by the spectacle of their most powerful Duke escorting their most unmarriageable wallflower across the ballroom like she was something precious. Adrian leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. Breathe. Clara sucked in air, dizzy with adrenaline and terror, and something that might have been exhilaration. They were halfway across the room when a woman stepped into their path. Lady Cecilia Hartwick, blonde and beautiful, and everything Clara wasn't. She'd been favored to catch the Duke's attention for months. "Your Grace." Cecilia's smile was razor sharp. "What an unexpected entrance." "Lady Cecilia." Adrian's tone was polite but cool. Cecilia's eyes slid to Clara, traveling from her tangled hair to her ash-stained cheeks. "Miss Whitmore, are you quite well? You look as though you've had some sort of accident." The concern was poisonous. Clara felt it settle over her like oil, slick and suffocating. This was the moment. The moment she was supposed to apologize, to make excuses, to shrink back into nothing. Instead, she smiled. "No accident, Lady Cecilia. Just a deliberate choice to stop pretending." Cecilia blinked, clearly thrown. I don't understand." "I know." Claire's voice was steady, stronger than she'd expected. "That's rather the point." A ripple of whispers spread through the nearby crowd. Adrian's hand tightened on hers again, but this time Clara thought it might be pride. "Well," Cecilia recovered, voice turning saccharine, "how very brave of you, though I'm not sure the Duke appreciates being made part of your dramatic statement." "Actually," Adrian interjected, his voice cutting through the growing murmur, "I find Miss Whitmore's honesty refreshing. So rare in these circles, don't you think?" Cecilia's smile turned brittle. "Of course, Your Grace, though one might argue there's a difference between honesty and disregard for propriety. And one might argue," Clara heard herself say, "that propriety is just another word for performing whatever makes other people comfortable, regardless of whether it suffocates who you actually are." The whispers exploded into full conversation. Someone laughed, sharp and mocking. Another woman clutched her pearls, literally. But Clara was done now, past the point of no return, and the words kept coming. "For 8 years," she continued, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "I've watched women torture themselves into shapes that please men who barely notice them. I've watched intelligent, capable people pretend to be empty-headed because complexity threatens fragile egos. I've watched everyone perform these elaborate lies, and I'm tired of it." "Miss Whitmore," Lady Pemberton's voice boomed from across the room, "this is highly inappropriate." "Is it?" Clara turned to face her, something reckless and free unfurling in her chest. "Or is it just uncomfortable? Because from where I'm standing, the only thing inappropriate here is how little truth anyone can tolerate." "That's enough!" Lord Hertford pushed through the crowd, red-faced with indignation. "Your Grace, I must protest this display. Miss Whitmore is clearly unwell." "Miss Whitmore is perfectly well," Adrian interrupted, his voice like steel beneath silk. "And she's saying what most of us are too cowardly to admit." The ballroom went dead silent. Clara's heart hammered as Adrian stepped forward, still holding her hand, but now facing the entire gathering with the full force of his ducal authority. "For years," he said quietly, but every word carried, "I've watched this society reward performance over substance, beauty over intelligence, compliance over courage, and I've been complicit in it through my silence." His eyes swept the crowd, and people actually flinched. "No more." "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton tried again. "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." Adrian's jaw set in a line that brooked no argument. "Miss Whitmore has more courage and honesty than anyone in this room, including myself. And if that makes her unsuitable for your approval, then perhaps your approval isn't worth having." The words hung in the air like a detonation. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening. The most powerful man in the realm had just publicly defended her, had chosen her side over the entire aristocracy. It was madness. It was social suicide. It was— "Come on." Adrian tugged her hand gently. "Let's get some air." They walked through the silent, stunned crowd toward the terrace doors. No one tried to stop them. No one even spoke. They just stared, mouths open, as the Duke and the disaster left the ballroom together. The night air hit Clara's face like a blessing. She gasped, her knees suddenly weak, and Adrian's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "I can't believe you just did that," she whispered. "I can't believe I waited this long." He guided her to a stone bench overlooking the gardens. "Sit. You look like you might faint." "I don't faint." "Of course you don't." But there was affection in his voice now, warmth that made her chest ache. Clara sank onto the bench, her hands trembling in her lap. Behind them, the ballroom buzzed with frantic conversation. Through the windows, she could see people gesturing, arguing, their faces animated with shock and scandal. "I've ruined you," she said flatly. "No." Adrian sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You freed me." "That's insane. You just alienated every important family in the realm." "I alienated the wrong people." His hand found hers again. "The right people will understand." "What right people? Everyone in there thinks I'm a disaster." "Good." His smile was fierce. "Let them think it. Let them talk. It'll separate the ones worth knowing from the ones we're better off without." Clara laughed, a little hysterically. "You're talking like we're in this together, like this is something, isn't it?" The question stopped her cold. She turned to face him fully, searching his expression for any sign of jest or cruelty. But all she found was intensity, focus, and something deeper she was afraid to name. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you doing this? You could have any woman in the realm. Perfect, accomplished women who actually fit your world. Why me?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving across her face like he was memorizing it. Then he spoke, and his voice was rougher than she'd ever heard it. "Because every other woman performs for me. They show me what they think I want to see, say what they think I want to hear. But you—" He reached up, his fingers brushing that smudge of ash on her cheek. "You sabotaged yourself rather than perform. You'd rather fail honestly than succeed through deception. And that kind of courage, Clara, that's what I've been searching for. That's what I need." Her breath caught. "Need?" "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "I need someone who'll tell me the truth, who'll challenge me when I'm wrong, who'll stand beside me not because of my title, but in spite of it." His thumb traced along her jaw. "I need you." The world tilted sideways. Clara felt like she was falling and being caught all at once. "This is madness," she breathed. "Probably." Adrian's smile was crooked, boyish, despite the hardness in his eyes. "But the alternative, continuing to pretend, to perform, to live half a life, that's worse than madness. That's death by 1,000 small compromises." Clara thought about the years stretching behind her, the endless nights of biting her tongue, making herself smaller, dimming her light so others could shine, the suffocating weight of trying to be acceptable, lovable, enough. And she thought about tonight, walking into that ballroom as herself, messy, honest, unpolished, and surviving, more than surviving, being claimed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. "Now we face whatever comes next, together. They'll try to tear us apart." "Let them try." His eyes blazed with certainty. "I've spent 3 years watching you from a distance, Clara. I'm done with distance." Behind them, the terrace doors burst open. Beatrice stumbled out, her face flushed. "Clara, everyone's talking about—" She stopped, taking in their joined hands, the intimacy of their stance. "Oh." "Hello, Beatrice," Adrian said mildly. "Your Grace?" Beatrice bobbed a curtsy, clearly flustered. "I apologize for interrupting, but Clara, Mother is beside herself. She's saying you've ruined everything, that we'll never be received anywhere again." "Then we won't," Clara interrupted. The words felt like a revelation. "If being received requires me to keep pretending, I don't want it." Beatrice's eyes went wide. "You can't mean that." "I do." And Clara realized she meant it more than she'd meant anything in her life. "I'm done, Bea. Done apologizing for existing, done trying to fit into a world that was never built for people like me." "But what will you do?" Clara looked at Adrian. He looked back, steady and sure, his hand a warm weight in hers. "I don't know," she admitted. "But for the first time in my life, I'm going to figure it out as myself. Not as some diminished version designed to make others comfortable." Beatrice opened her mouth, closed it. Then, to Clara's shock, her cousin smiled. "Good. You've been half alive for years. It's about time." "You're not angry?" "I'm terrified for you." Beatrice's smile turned wry, but also proud. Someone needed to burn it all down. Might as well be you. A commotion inside drew their attention. Through the windows, Clara could see Lady Pemberton gesturing dramatically, other women clustering around her. The men had separated into their own arguing groups. The entire social order was fracturing in real time. "It's starting," Clara murmured. "Let it," Adrian said. And as they stood there together, watching the old world crack apart, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The morning after the ball arrived with all the subtlety of a firing squad, Clara woke to the sound of her mother's footsteps pacing the hallway outside her room, sharp, angry clicks against hardwood that had been going on for what sounded like hours. She'd barely sat up in bed when the door flew open. "Get dressed," Margaret Whitmore said, her face pale and drawn. "We're leaving within the hour." "Leaving?" Clara blinked, still foggy with sleep. "What?" "The Ashford estate. This house. This entire county, if I have my way." Her mother's hands twisted in her skirts, a gesture Clara had seen 1,000 times, but never quite this frantic. "I've arranged for us to return to London immediately. Your aunt has agreed to take us in until we can figure out what to do about this disaster you've created." Clara's stomach dropped. "Mother, I can explain." "Explain?" Margaret's voice cracked. "Explain what exactly? How you deliberately humiliated yourself in front of the entire aristocracy? How you dragged the Duke of Blackthorn into your spectacle? How you've made us the laughingstock of every drawing room from here to Scotland?" "That's not—" "The letters started arriving at dawn." Her mother pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, her hand shaking. "Lady Pemberton has withdrawn her invitation to the garden party. The Haverford family has made it clear we're no longer welcome at their estate. Even your cousin Beatrice's engagement might be in jeopardy because of your actions last night." The guilt hit like a physical blow. Clara had known there would be consequences, but hearing them laid out in such stark terms made her chest tight. "Beatrice's engagement? But she didn't do anything. She's associated with you. That's enough." Margaret sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking older than her 48 years. "Do you understand what you've done, Clara? This isn't just about you anymore. Your actions have consequences for everyone in this family." Clara's throat burned. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain that she'd spent 8 years suffocating under the weight of expectations that were never meant for her. But looking at her mother's devastated face, the words died before they could form. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix this." Margaret stood abruptly, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. "Get dressed. We leave in an hour." She was gone before Clara could respond. Clara sat there in the silence, her mother's words echoing through her skull. The morning light filtering through the curtains seemed too bright, too cheerful for the wreckage of her life. She thought about Adrian's hand in hers, his certainty that they could face whatever came next together, but together assumed he'd still want her after this. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. "Clara?" Beatrice's voice tentative. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Her cousin slipped through the door, closing it quietly behind her. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair hastily pinned, her dress wrinkled like she'd slept in it. "I heard Aunt Margaret," Beatrice said, sitting beside Clara on the bed. "She's terrified." "I know. The gossip is worse than we thought. Some of the women are calling you disturbed. Others think the Duke was being charitable to a madwoman." Beatrice paused. "Lady Cecilia is telling everyone you threw yourself at him." Clara's hands clenched in the bedsheets. "Of course she is." "There's more." Beatrice's voice dropped lower. "Lord Hertford is petitioning to have you barred from future social events. He's claiming your behavior was not just inappropriate but dangerous, that you're a corrupting influence on young women." "Corrupting?" Clara laughed, bitter and sharp. "I told the truth. Apparently that's contagious. To them it is." Beatrice took Clara's hand, squeezing gently. "They're scared, Clara. You've challenged the entire foundation of how they understand their world. People like Lady Pemberton and Lord Hertford, their entire identity is built on these rigid rules. If those rules don't matter, then who are they? I don't care who they are." "I know, but they care." Beatrice's eyes were sad. "And they have power. Enough power to destroy you if you're not careful." Clara pulled her hand free, standing to pace toward the window. Outside, servants were already loading trunks onto carriages. Her mother wasn't bluffing. They really were leaving. "What about the Duke?" she asked quietly. Beatrice was silent for a long moment. "What about him? Has he... Has there been any word from him this morning?" "Clara." Beatrice's tone was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "It's been less than 12 hours. He's probably still dealing with the fallout himself." "Right. Of course." Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "It was stupid to think—" "It wasn't stupid." Beatrice came to stand beside her. "Last night was real. I saw the way he looked at you. But Clara, you need to understand what you're asking of him. The Duke doesn't just have himself to consider. He has responsibilities, political alliances, family expectations. Defending you last night was brave, but continuing to do so in the face of this kind of opposition would be social suicide." Clara finished the thought. "I know. I'm not saying he won't." Beatrice squeezed her shoulder. "I'm saying it's not a small thing to ask. And if he does choose you, it won't be easy for either of you." Clara closed her eyes. She'd known this, of course. Had known it the moment Adrian took her hand last night. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones were two very different things. "I should get dressed," she said finally. "Mother wants to leave soon." "Are you going to let her take you to London?" "What choice do I have?" Beatrice studied her for a long moment. "You always have a choice, Clara. That's what last night proved." But as her cousin left and Clara began mechanically pulling on clothes, she wondered if that was true. Last night she'd had Adrian beside her, his certainty anchoring her courage. This morning, alone in the cold light of consequence, her bravery felt thin and insubstantial. She was halfway through pinning her hair when another knock came at the door. "I'm almost ready, Mother," Clara called. The door opened anyway, but it wasn't her mother. Adrian Blackthorne stood in her doorway for the second time in 12 hours, and Clara's heart did something complicated and painful in her chest. He looked different in daylight, less polished, more real. His hair was slightly mussed, his cravat tied hastily, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept. But his gaze was steady, intense, and entirely focused on her. "You shouldn't be here," Clara said, her voice coming out strangled. "If anyone sees—" "I don't care who sees." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Are you leaving?" "My mother thinks it's best." "I'm asking what you think." Clara's hands twisted in her skirts. I think maybe she's right. The damage is done. Staying will only make it worse." "Worse for whom?" "For everyone." The words burst out of her. "For my family, for Beatrice's engagement, for—" She cut herself off, unable to say, "for you." Adrian crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Look at me." Clara's breath caught, but she obeyed. "Last night," he said quietly, "I made you a promise. Do you remember?" She nodded mutely. "I told you that whatever came next, we'd face it together. That promise didn't expire at dawn." His thumbs brushed along her cheekbones. "I'm here, Clara. I'm still here. But the consequences are mine to bear as much as yours." His jaw set in that stubborn line she was beginning to recognize. "I knew what I was doing last night. I knew how they'd react. And I did it anyway because you were worth it. You are worth it." Tears burned in Clara's eyes. "My mother says I've ruined everything." "Your mother is scared," Adrian's voice gentled. "She's been playing by their rules her whole life, and suddenly her daughter has torn up the rulebook. Of course she's terrified. But Clara—" He waited until she met his eyes again. "Being scared doesn't make you wrong." "It doesn't make me right either." "No, but standing up when it would be easier to kneel? That makes you brave." His hands slid down to her shoulders. "And I need you to stay brave a little longer." "Why? What's happened?" Adrian's expression turned grim. "We're being summoned." Clara's stomach dropped. "Summoned? By whom?" "The Queen." The world tilted sideways. Clara actually stumbled, and Adrian's hands tightened on her shoulders, steadying her. "The Queen," she repeated faintly. "Her Majesty wants to see us?" "Not us. You." Adrian's voice was careful, controlled. Apparently word of last night's events reached the palace by morning. Her Majesty has requested your presence at court this afternoon to discuss your conduct and its implications for the social order. Clara couldn't breathe. The Queen. The actual Queen wanted to discuss her conduct. This was worse than anything she'd imagined, worse than gossip, worse than social exile, worse than… Clara. Adrian gave her a gentle shake. Stay with me. This is a disaster. Her voice came out high and thin. The Queen doesn't summon people for tea and pleasantries. She summons them to make examples of them. I know. I'll be publicly censured, possibly banished from court entirely. My family will be ruined. And you… She looked up at him, horror dawning. You'll be associated with all of it. Your standing with the crown will be damaged. Probably. He said it so calmly, like they were discussing the weather instead of her complete destruction. But I'm not letting you face her alone. Adrian, you can't… I can. His hands slid to her arms, his grip firm. And I will. The summons may be for you, but I'm coming regardless. If Her Majesty wants to censure you, she'll have to go through me first. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Clara's chest ache. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. We've had one conversation, one night. I've been watching you for 3 years, Adrian interrupted. I've seen you bite your tongue when fools spoke. I've watched you dim your light to make others comfortable. I've observed every compromise you've made to survive in a world that was hostile to everything you are. And last night, I finally saw you stop compromising. His eyes blazed with something that made her knees weak. You think I'm going to let them force you back into that cage? Not a chance. But no. His voice turned hard. No more buts. No more trying to protect me from my own choices. I'm a grown man with more power and privilege than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. If I can't use that power to stand beside someone worth standing with, then what's the point of having it? Clara stared at him, this man who made no sense, who was risking everything for reasons she couldn't fully comprehend. You're insane. Maybe. A smile ghosted across his face. But so are you. We can be insane together. Before she could respond, footsteps thundered in the hallway. The door flew open without ceremony, and Margaret Whitmore stood there, her face white as bone. Your Grace. She dropped into a hasty curtsy. I apologize for the intrusion, but we've received… She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. I know about the summons, Adrian said calmly. That's why I'm here. Margaret's eyes darted between them, confusion and fear warring on her face. Then you understand that Clara must prepare. We need to choose her clothing carefully, rehearse what she'll say, ensure she presents herself in the most favorable… With respect, Mrs. Whitmore, that's exactly what Clara will not do. Margaret's mouth fell open. I beg your pardon. Last night, Clara was punished for being honest. If she shows up today performing contrition she doesn't feel, it will only prove their point. That truth must be suppressed, that authenticity is dangerous, that we must all pretend to maintain order. Adrian's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I won't let her do that. But the Queen will see Clara exactly as she is. And if that's unacceptable to Her Majesty, then so be it. Margaret looked like she might faint. Your Grace, I appreciate your support, but you don't understand what you're asking. Clara is not you. She doesn't have your title, your protection, your standing. If she offends the Queen, she'll have me, Adrian interrupted. My title, my protection, my standing, all of it. The room went deathly silent. Clara felt like she was floating outside her body, watching this scene unfold from a great distance. This couldn't be real. The Duke of Blackthorn couldn't be standing in her bedroom, promising his entire position to defend her against the Queen herself. Adrian, she whispered, what are you saying? He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart stop. I'm saying that if Her Majesty wants to punish you for refusing to be less than you are, she'll have to punish me too. Because I'm not letting you face this alone. But that's… Margaret couldn't seem to find words. That's exactly what I intend to do. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. Now, Mrs. Whitmore, I suggest you help your daughter prepare for court, not by teaching her to perform, but by reminding her of her own strength. She'll need it. He turned back to Clara, his hand finding hers one more time. I'll meet you at the palace gates. 2 hours. Adrian, 2 hours, Clara, don't run. He squeezed her fingers once, then released them and strode toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back. And Clara? Wear whatever makes you feel most like yourself, not what you think they want to see. Then he was gone. Clara and her mother stood in the silent room, staring at each other. He's going to destroy himself for you, Margaret finally whispered. Do you understand that? The Duke of Blackthorn is going to throw away everything. His standing, his political alliances, possibly even his title. All for a girl he barely knows. I know. Clara's voice was hollow. And you're going to let him? The question hung between them, sharp and cutting. Clara thought about running, about grabbing her mother's offered escape route to London, disappearing into anonymity, letting Adrian save his own skin without her complicating everything. It would be the sensible thing, the safe thing, the cowardly thing. No, she said slowly. I'm not going to let him destroy himself. I'm going to stand beside him and face whatever comes, together. Margaret closed her eyes. You're just like your father, stubborn and idealistic and completely blind to practical reality. Maybe. Clara's chin lifted. But father also taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. And you think this is one of those things? This, whatever this is between you and the Duke? Clara thought about Adrian's hand in hers, his certainty, his refusal to let her shrink, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. Yes, she said. I think it is. Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed, deep and resigned. Then we'd better find you something appropriate to wear. If you're going to face the Queen, you might as well look like you mean it. 2 hours later, Clara stood at the palace gates, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She'd chosen a deep green dress, simpler than court fashion dictated, but well-made and flattering. Her hair was pinned neatly but not elaborately. She wore minimal jewelry. She looked, she thought, like exactly what she was, a woman who refused to apologize for existing. Adrian appeared from the opposite direction, dressed in formal court attire that somehow made him look both more intimidating and more human. His face was set in hard lines, but when he saw her, something in his expression softened. You came, he said. You doubted I would? No. He offered his arm. But I'm glad anyway. Clara took his arm and they walked through the palace gates together. Servants and courtiers stared openly as they passed. Clara heard whispers following them like smoke, scandalous, shameless, inappropriate. She kept her head high. They were led through ornate hallways, past portraits of monarchs and military victories, into the heart of power itself. Finally, they stopped before an imposing set of double doors. Her Majesty will see you now, the servant announced. The doors swung open. The Queen's private receiving room was smaller than Clara expected, but no less intimidating for it. Tapestries covered the walls. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth. And at the center of it all sat Queen Victoria herself, elderly but sharp-eyed, her expression inscrutable. Clara and Adrian bowed and curtsied. Your Grace, the Queen acknowledged Adrian, and Miss Whitmore. How unexpected to see you both together. Your Majesty. Adrian's voice was respectful but firm. I hope you don't mind my accompanying Miss Whitmore. I felt it was important. Did you? It wasn't a question. The Queen's gaze moved to Clara, assessing her with the weight of decades of political maneuvering. Miss Whitmore, I've been hearing quite a bit about you this morning. Clara's throat was dry as sand. I can imagine, Your Majesty. Can you? The Queen leaned forward slightly. Tell me, child, do you have any idea the chaos you've caused? Clara swallowed hard. I didn't intend to cause chaos, Your Majesty. I only intended to stop pretending. Ah, stop pretending. The Queen sat back, her expression unreadable. And what exactly were you pretending to be? Someone I wasn't. The words came out steadier than Clara expected. Someone smaller. Someone who didn't think or question or challenge. Someone acceptable to a society that values compliance over truth. A heavy silence fell. The Queen's fingers drummed once on the arm of her chair. You realize that what you call compliance, others call civilization, social order, the structures that keep society functioning. I understand that, Your Majesty, but I also believe those structures only function by forcing certain people, particularly women, to make themselves less than they are. And I can't do that anymore. Can't? Or won't? Clara met the Queen's eyes. Both. Another long silence. Clara could feel Adrian tense beside her, could sense his readiness to intervene, but something told her this was her moment, her choice. Your Majesty, Clara continued, her voice gaining strength, I have spent 8 years of my life trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for me. I have bitten my tongue until it bled. I have made myself smaller, quieter, less, and it nearly destroyed me. So yes, I caused chaos last night, but that chaos was the sound of me refusing to destroy myself anymore. The Queen studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then, to Clara's complete shock, she smiled. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. You remind me of someone, the Queen said softly. Myself, perhaps, many years ago, before I learned the necessary compromises of power. She stood, and both Clara and Adrian straightened. The ladies of the court are calling for your censure, Miss Whitmore. They want me to publicly rebuke you, to make an example of your behavior. Clara's heart sank. I understand, Your Majesty. Do you? The Queen moved closer, her gaze piercing. Because I'm not certain you do. The women calling for your punishment aren't doing so because they think you're wrong. They're doing it because they're terrified you're right. Clara's breath caught. For generations, the Queen continued, women of quality have been taught that their value lies in their ability to be pleasant, decorative, and silent. You've challenged that teaching, and if you're allowed to challenge it without consequence, what stops every other woman from doing the same? She paused. That's what they fear, not you, specifically, but what you represent. Change, Adrian said quietly. Precisely. The Queen turned to him. And you, Your Grace, have chosen to stand with that change. A bold move, especially given your position. Miss Whitmore is worth standing with, Your Majesty. Is she? The Queen's smile turned sharper. Or are you simply enamored with rebellion? I'm enamored with honesty, Adrian replied evenly, something I've found in short supply in our social circles. The Queen laughed, short and surprised. Careful, Your Grace. That kind of honesty could get you in as much trouble as Miss Whitmore here. Then we'll be in trouble together. The Queen shook her head, but there was something almost fond in her expression. Youth. So certain, so passionate. She returned to her chair, settling into it with the weight of her years. Very well. Here's my decision. Clara's fingernails dug into her palms. I will not censure you, Miss Whitmore, nor will I rebuke your conduct. Relief flooded through Clara so fast she felt dizzy. But the Queen wasn't finished. However, she continued, her voice hardening, I also cannot overtly endorse your behavior. The political reality is too complicated, the opposition too entrenched. So instead, I will do nothing. I will neither condemn nor condone. You will be allowed to attend court functions, but you will receive no special favor or protection from me. Do you understand? Clara nodded slowly. It was better than condemnation, but barely. It meant she'd still be vulnerable, still exposed to the attacks of people like Lady Pemberton and Lord Hertford. Thank you, Your Majesty, she managed. Don't thank me yet. The Queen's eyes were sad. What I'm giving you is permission to keep fighting a battle you may not win. The society you've challenged will not change overnight. They will resist. They will attack. They will do everything in their power to force you back into the mold you've broken free from. And I cannot protect you from that. I understand. Do you? The Queen stood again, moving closer. She reached out, her aged hand lifting Clara's chin gently. Look at me, child. Truly look. I have been queen for decades. I have power most people can only dream of. And even I have had to compromise, to bend, to perform for the sake of stability. What makes you think you can succeed where I have not? The question settled over Clara like a weight. What did make her think she could win? She had no title, no power, no resources beyond her own stubborn refusal to submit. And Adrian, she had Adrian. "I don't know if I can succeed, Your Majesty," Clara said honestly, "but I know I have to try. Because if I don't, if I go back to pretending, I'll lose the only thing that truly belongs to me, myself." The Queen held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Then try, Miss Whitmore. Try with everything you have, and perhaps—" Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "Perhaps your generation will succeed where mine could not." She released Clara's chin and stepped back. "You are dismissed, both of you. And Miss Whitmore?" Clara turned back. "Yes, Your Majesty?" "Whatever happens next, whatever battles you face, remember that courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." The Queen's smile was small, but genuine. "You have courage. Don't lose it." They left the receiving room in stunned silence. It wasn't until they were outside, standing in the palace gardens, that Clara finally let herself breathe. "Well," Adrian said, "that could have gone worse." Clara laughed, the sound verging on hysterical. "Could it? She basically gave us permission to be destroyed by society while she watches from the sidelines. She gave us permission to keep fighting." Adrian turned to face her, his hands finding her shoulders. "That's more than I expected. What do we do now?" "Now?" Adrian's expression turned determined. "Now we prepare for war, because that's what this is, Clara. The old guard protecting their power, their way of life, their right to demand compliance. And we've just declared ourselves the opposition." Clara thought about Lady Pemberton's fury, Lord Hertford's petition, the whispers and gossip that had already started. The Queen was right. Society would resist, viciously. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." Adrian pulled her closer, his arms coming around her. "But fear doesn't mean we stop. It just means we fight smarter." Clara buried her face in his chest, letting herself have this moment of weakness before the next battle began. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, anchoring her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this? You could walk away, save yourself, choose an easier path." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because for 3 years, I've watched you suffer under the weight of their expectations. I've seen you diminish yourself, silence yourself, break yourself trying to fit their mold. And then last night, for the first time, I saw you whole." His arms tightened around her. "I can't go back to watching you break, Clara. I won't, even if it costs me everything." Clara pulled back just enough to look up at him. His eyes were fierce, determined, and utterly sincere. And in that moment, she realized something that changed everything. She loved him. It was insane. They'd had one real conversation, one night of honesty, but love didn't follow logical timelines. It struck when it wanted, fierce and undeniable and completely terrifying. "Adrian," she started, but he pressed a finger to her lips. "Don't," he said softly. "Don't say anything you can't take back. Not yet. Not until you're sure." "But we have time." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "Once this settles, once we've fought through the worst of it, then we'll figure out what this is. But right now, I need you focused on surviving. Can you do that?" Clara nodded, even though her heart felt too big for her chest. "Good." Adrian stepped back, his expression shifting to something more businesslike. "Now, here's what's going to happen. The court will continue their attacks. Lady Pemberton will mobilize every influential woman she knows. Lord Hertford will use his political connections to try to isolate us. We need to be prepared." "How?" "By building our own alliances. By finding the people who are tired of the old ways, who want change but haven't had the courage to demand it. They're out there, Clara. Last night proved it. We just need to find them." "And if we can't?" Adrian's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Then we'll face the opposition head-on, together, like we've been doing from the start." A sound behind them made them both turn. A young woman in court dress stood at the edge of the garden, clearly having overheard at least part of their conversation. Clara recognized her. Lady Elizabeth Thorne, younger daughter of an earl, always quiet at social gatherings. "Forgive me," Elizabeth said, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but She took a breath. "I wanted to say that what you did last night, Miss Whitmore, was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Clara blinked in surprise. "I... thank you." "No, thank you." Elizabeth moved closer, her expression fierce despite her obvious nerves. "I've spent 3 years watching my own intelligence dismissed, my own thoughts ignored. I was starting to think I was the problem. But last night you proved I wasn't. None of us are." She looked between Clara and Adrian. "Whatever you're planning, whatever fight you're preparing for, I want to help." Adrian and Clara exchanged glances. "Lady Elizabeth," Adrian said carefully, "what we're doing is dangerous. If you associate with us, you'll face the same consequences we do." "I know." Elizabeth lifted her chin. "And I don't care. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being less. If there's even a chance things could change, I want to be part of it." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not just one person willing to fight, but two. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. "Then you're welcome to join us," Clara said, reaching out to take Elizabeth's hand. "But I should warn you, we have no idea what we're doing." Elizabeth smiled, genuine and bright. "Neither do they. At least we're honest about it." And there, in the Queen's garden, surrounded by the symbols of power and tradition, 3 people who'd been told they were too much or not enough made a silent pact. To fight, to resist, to refuse the cages society built for them. It was small. It was fragile. But it was real. And that, Clara thought, as she looked at Adrian's determined face and Elizabeth's fierce hope, was enough to start with. Within a week, everything Clara thought she understood about power and consequence came crashing down around her. It started small. A withdrawn invitation here, a cold shoulder there. Lady Pemberton's promised garden party became an exclusive affair that somehow forgot to include the Whitmore family. The Haverford estate closed its doors. Even distant cousins began making excuses to avoid association. But Clara had expected that. What she hadn't expected was the systematic nature of the assault. "They've cut off our credit," her mother announced one morning, her voice hollow as she stood in the doorway of Clara's room. The dressmaker, the milliner, even the grocer, all of them received visits from Lady Pemberton's people. "We're no longer welcome to maintain accounts anywhere in the county." Clara looked up from the letter she'd been writing to Elizabeth Thorne. "Can they do that?" "Apparently they can." Margaret's hands twisted in her apron. "Your father's solicitor sent word this morning. Several of his business associates have withdrawn their partnerships. They're calling it a reevaluation of priorities, but we all know what it really means." The weight of it settled over Clara like a stone. This wasn't just social exile anymore. This was economic warfare. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. "Bad enough that we'll need to let the staff go by month's end. Bad enough that we may need to sell the London house." Her mother's voice cracked. "All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut for one evening." The accusation stung, even though Clara had been expecting it. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Margaret moved into the room, her expression harder than Clara had ever seen it. "Because from where I'm standing, you seem quite content to let everyone else pay for your principles." "That's not fair, isn't it? Beatrice's engagement is hanging by a thread. Your father's livelihood is being destroyed. Our entire family's future is crumbling. And you," she gestured at the letter in Clara's hand, "you're writing to Lady Elizabeth, recruiting more casualties for your little rebellion." Clara's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask Adrian to defend me. I didn't ask the Queen to—" "No, you just made yourself into a spectacle and expected everyone else to pick up the pieces." Margaret's voice broke. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your child destroy everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed for?" "Mother, just stop." Margaret turned toward the door. "Lord Ashford has requested a meeting with your father this afternoon. Something about dissolving certain arrangements. I'm sure you can imagine what that means." She left before Clara could respond. Clara sat there, the letter to Elizabeth forgotten in her lap, guilt churning in her stomach. She'd known there would be consequences, but knowing and experiencing were two different things. Watching her family suffer because of her choices felt like being torn apart from the inside. A knock at the front door interrupted her spiral. Clara heard raised voices downstairs, her mother's sharp, a man's deeper. Then footsteps on the stairs, and Beatrice burst into the room, her face flushed with fury. "They broke the engagement," she announced without preamble. Clara's heart dropped. No. Lord Hartley's mother made the decision this morning, said she couldn't allow her son to marry into a family with questionable moral standards. Beatrice laughed, bitter and sharp. 3 years of courtship, Clara. 3 years of planning a future together, and it's gone because you decided to have an opinion in public. I'm so sorry. The words felt pathetically inadequate. If there's anything I can do, there's nothing you can do. It's done. Beatrice sank onto the bed beside her, all the anger draining out into exhaustion. And the worst part? I'm not even sure I'm angry at you. Clara blinked. What? Lord Hartley barely even protested when his mother made the announcement. Just nodded along like I was a business arrangement being dissolved, not a person he claimed to love. Beatrice's voice went quiet. Maybe I should thank you. At least now I know what I was really worth to him. They sat in silence for a moment, two women caught in the wreckage of a world that was imploding around them. Elizabeth sent a reply to your letter, Beatrice finally said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. It came to our house instead of yours. Probably safer that way. Clara took it, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. Elizabeth's handwriting was small and precise. Clara, things are worse than we thought. Lady Pemberton has organized what she's calling a Society Protection Committee. They're systematically targeting anyone who showed you even basic kindness at the Ashford Ball. My own mother received a visit yesterday, warning her to keep better control of me. I'm being watched constantly. But I'm not backing down. I found 3 other women willing to meet in secret. We'll send details when safe. Stay strong. A protection committee, Clara whispered. They've actually organized against us. Of course they have. Beatrice took the letter, scanning it quickly. You challenged the entire foundation of their power structure. Did you think they'd just let that go? Before Clara could answer, the front door slammed downstairs. Her father's voice boomed through the house, angry, defeated. Then her mother's, equally upset, the sound of breaking glass. That can't be good, Beatrice murmured. They hurried downstairs to find Clara's father, Thomas Whitmore, standing in the parlor surrounded by shattered crystal. His face was red, his hands shaking. They've called in the loan, he said without preamble. Lord Ashford and his consortium. They're demanding immediate repayment of the investment I made in the textile mill. £30,000, Clara, due within a fortnight. The number hit like a physical blow. £30,000 was more than most families saw in a lifetime. Can we pay it? Margaret asked, her voice thin. Not without selling everything. The house, the land, my share in the business, all of it. Thomas looked at Clara, and the devastation in his eyes made her want to disappear. This is what your rebellion has cost us, daughter. Everything. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The weight of it was too much, too real, too immediate, too catastrophic. There might be another option, Beatrice said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Lord Hartley's mother mentioned something during the dissolution meeting. She said that if Clara were to make a public apology, a full recantation of her behavior, and a commitment to proper conduct, some of the families might be willing to reconsider their positions. Absolutely not, Clara said immediately. £30,000, Clara. Her father's voice was sharp. Your entire family's future. And you won't even consider apologizing? Apologizing for what? For refusing to be silent? For having thoughts and opinions? For being honest about the emptiness of their entire social system? For destroying us? Thomas slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. For putting your pride above your family's survival. It's not pride. Then what is it? What principle is worth watching your mother and sister lose everything? What cause justifies throwing away every advantage you've ever had? Clara's hands clenched into fists. The cause of being allowed to exist is myself, of not having to break myself into pieces to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. Pretty words. Her father's laugh was ugly. Let's see how pretty they sound when we're homeless. The cruelty of it stole Clara's breath. She looked at her mother, hoping for some sign of support, but Margaret's face was turned away. Even Beatrice wouldn't meet her eyes. Fine, Clara whispered, if that's what you want. If an apology will fix everything, it won't fix everything, Thomas interrupted. But it might buy us enough goodwill to survive. That's all I'm asking for, Clara. A chance to survive. Clara opened her mouth to respond when another knock came at the door. This time, when the servant answered, Adrian Blackthorne strode into the parlor like he owned it. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I've just come from a meeting with Lord Ashford." Thomas's face went carefully blank. "Your Grace, I wasn't aware you were involved in this matter." "I wasn't, until an hour ago, when Ashford made the mistake of gloating about his financial maneuvering." Adrian's expression was ice. He seemed to think I'd find it amusing that he was using debt to force Miss Whitmore into submission. "And did you?" Thomas asked, his tone bitter. "Find it amusing?" "I found it instructive." Adrian pulled a folded document from his coat. "Which is why I've purchased your debt from Lord Ashford's consortium. As of this morning, you owe the money to me, not them." The silence was absolute. Thomas took the document with shaking hands, scanning it quickly. His face went from red to white to red again. "This is... You can't..." "I can, and I have." Adrian's tone left no room for argument. "The loan terms remain the same, except for one modification. The repayment period is extended to 5 years instead of 2 weeks. That should give you time to arrange your finances without selling everything." "Why would you do this?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's eyes found Clara's. "Because what's happening to your family isn't about debt or business. It's about punishment, about forcing Clara to recant her honesty through economic violence. And I won't allow that." "You won't allow it?" Thomas's voice rose. "With all due respect, Your Grace, you've already allowed quite a bit. You've encouraged my daughter's behavior, defended her publicly, and now you've inserted yourself into our family's private finances. Forgive me if I'm not overflowing with gratitude." "Father," Clara started, but Adrian held up a hand. "You're right to be angry, Mr. Whitmore. I have inserted myself where I wasn't invited, but I've also prevented your immediate ruin." He set the document on the table. "This isn't charity. I expect full repayment with interest. But it is protection from those who would use your daughter's courage as justification for destroying you." "Her courage?" Thomas laughed, sharp and painful. "Is that what we're calling it? Because it looks an awful lot like selfishness from where I'm standing." The words hit Clara like a slap. She'd expected anger from society, from Lady Pemberton and Lord Hertford and the rest of the old guard. But this, her own father calling her selfish, treating her honesty as a burden, this carved something out of her chest. "I never asked for this," she said, her voice breaking. "I never asked Adrian to defend me. I never asked the Queen for an audience. I just wanted to stop pretending for one evening. One evening, after 8 years of suffocating, and now I'm the villain because I couldn't keep breaking myself?" "You're the villain because you didn't consider the consequences," Thomas shot back. "Because you put your own need for validation above everyone who depends on you." "That's enough," Adrian said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is it?" Thomas turned on him. "You've known my daughter for what, a week? And you think you understand the situation better than her own family? You think your title gives you the right to interfere in our lives?" "No, but my resources do." Adrian's expression hardened. "And if you're too proud to accept help from someone who cares about your daughter's well-being, then perhaps your pride is the real problem here." The tension in the room crackled like lightning about to strike. "Get out," Thomas said quietly. "Father, please." Clara reached for his arm, but he pulled away. "I said get out. You've done enough damage, Your Grace. To my family, to my daughter's reputation, to everything we've built. We don't need your money or your protection. We'll handle this ourselves." Adrian looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She wanted to tell him to stay, to fight, to fix this somehow. But the devastation on her father's face stopped her. "Go," she whispered. "Please." Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Hurt, maybe, or frustration, but he nodded curtly and turned toward the door. He paused at the threshold. "The loan document stands, whether you accept it or not. You have 5 years to repay." He looked back at Clara one more time. "And Clara, this isn't over, no matter what they tell you." Then he was gone. The silence he left behind was suffocating. "Well," Thomas said finally, his voice drained of all emotion, "I hope you're satisfied, daughter. You've successfully destroyed everything." "Thomas," Margaret started, but he held up a hand. "I need air." He walked out, leaving the three women standing in the wreckage. Clara felt like she was watching herself from a great distance. This couldn't be real. Her father couldn't actually hate her. Her family couldn't actually be falling apart because she dared to be honest for one evening. But they were. It was all happening, inevitable as a landslide. "I should go," Beatrice said quietly, "before Mother arrives looking for me." She left without another word. Clara turned to her mother, desperate for something, comfort, understanding, absolution. But Margaret just looked at her with tired, disappointed eyes. "You should have apologized when you had the chance," she said, "before it went this far." "If I apologize now it won't matter." Margaret's voice was flat. "Now Adrian has involved himself financially, which means the society won't accept a simple apology. They'll see it as coerced, as meaningless. You've backed yourself into a corner where the only way out is complete capitulation or complete destruction." Clara's legs felt weak. She sank into a chair, her mind racing. "What do I do?" "I don't know." Her mother moved toward the door. "But whatever you decide, you'll need to live with the consequences. We all will." She left Clara alone in the parlor, surrounded by broken crystal and broken trust. 3 days later, Clara received a summons to the Pemberton estate. Not an invitation, a summons. The language was clear. "Your presence is required at Lady Pemberton's residence this Friday at 2 o'clock to address matters of mutual concern." Clara stared at the heavy cardstock, her stomach twisting. This was a trap. It had to be. Lady Pemberton didn't do anything without strategic purpose, and summoning the woman she'd been systematically destroying meant something significant was about to happen. She should refuse, should stay home, stay safe, avoid whatever ambush Pemberton was planning. But something reckless in Clara, the same thing that had made her smudge ash on her face that first night, wouldn't let her hide. She went. The Pemberton estate was massive, all white stone and manicured gardens, designed to remind visitors of their inferior status. Clara was led through ornate hallways by a servant who wouldn't meet her eyes, finally deposited in a drawing room that held not just Lady Pemberton, but a dozen other influential women. Lady Cecilia Hartwick, Lady Ashford, the Duchess of Kellington, every major social power in the region, all gathered and staring at Clara like she was an insect they were deciding whether to crush. "Miss Whitmore," Lady Pemberton's smile was sharp as a blade. "How good of you to join us." "Did I have a choice?" Clara asked, keeping her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "We all have choices, dear. That's rather the point of this gathering." Pemberton gestured to an empty chair in the center of the room. "Please, sit." Clara sat, feeling like a defendant in a trial, which she realized was exactly what this was. "I assume you know why you're here," Pemberton continued. "To be publicly humiliated?" Several of the women gasped at the audacity, but Pemberton just laughed. "Honesty. How refreshing. Though I notice you're only honest when you have nothing left to lose." She circled Clara's chair slowly, a predator sizing up prey. "Tell me, Miss Whitmore, do you think you're special? Do you think you're the first woman to chafe against the expectations of society?" "I think I'm the first one stupid enough to say it out loud," Clara replied. "There's some truth to that." Pemberton stopped in front of her. "But what you don't seem to understand is that those expectations exist for a reason. They're not arbitrary cruelty. They're the framework that keeps civilization functioning. By crushing half the population into silence? By channeling energy into productive directions instead of chaos." Pemberton's voice turned hard. "You think you're fighting for freedom, Miss Whitmore. But what you're really fighting for is the right to be selfish, to prioritize your own comfort over the stability of the society that sustains you." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "That's not, isn't it?" Lady Cecilia leaned forward. "Your family is facing ruin because of your actions. Your cousin's engagement was destroyed. Businesses your father built for decades are crumbling. And yet you persist in this performance of victimhood, as if you're the one being wronged." I am being wronged, Clara said, her voice rising. We all are. Every woman in this room has been told to be smaller, quieter, less than what she actually is. And you've all accepted it because it's easier than fighting, but that doesn't make it right. Right. The Duchess of Kellington spoke for the first time, her aged voice cutting. Such a young person's word, so certain of moral absolutes. She studied Clara with eyes that had seen decades of political maneuvering. Let me tell you what's right, child. What's right is protecting your family, honoring your obligations, making the sacrifices necessary to preserve what matters. And what matters? Clara challenged. Appearances? Reputation? The approval of people who would destroy you the moment you step out of line? Survival matters. Pemberton's voice dropped to something almost gentle, which was somehow more frightening than her anger. And you, Miss Whitmore, are about to learn a very hard lesson about what survival requires. The air in the room shifted. Clara felt it like a physical change, the way prey animals sense a predator about to strike. We have a proposition for you, Pemberton continued, a way to end this conflict before it destroys you completely. I'm listening. You will make a public statement recanting your behavior at the Ashford ball. You will apologize for your inappropriate conduct and commit to adhering to proper social standards going forward. You will sever all contact with the Duke of Blackthorn. Pemberton paused, and in exchange, we will restore your family's social standing, reinstate their business partnerships, and ensure they suffer no further consequences. Clara's throat went dry. And if I refuse? Then we continue our current course. Pemberton's smile was cold. Your father's business will collapse entirely. Your family will be exiled from all social circles. Every door will close. Every opportunity will vanish. And eventually, the Duke himself will tire of the burden you've become. He'll abandon you to save his own position, and you'll be left with nothing. The words settled over Clara like a shroud. She looked around the room at these powerful women, all watching her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. They'd planned this perfectly, offered her a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. How long do I have to decide? She asked quietly. Until the Ashford Grand Ball next week. It's the social event of the season. Everyone who matters will attend. You'll make your statement there, publicly, where it can't be retracted or diminished. Pemberton leaned closer. Or you'll watch everything you love burn. Your choice, Miss Whitmore. Clara stood on shaking legs. May I go? Of course. Think carefully about your decision. Pemberton's voice followed her to the door. And Miss Whitmore? The Duke's protection won't save you from this. We've made certain of that. Clara didn't respond. She just walked out, through the ornate hallways, past the pitying servants, out into the cold afternoon air where she could finally breathe. She made it halfway down the drive before the tears came. Adrian found her an hour later sitting on a stone wall at the edge of his own estate. She'd walked there without consciously deciding to, her feet carrying her to the one place that felt remotely safe. Clara. He vaulted off his horse, moving toward her with urgency. I've been looking everywhere. Your mother said you went to Pemberton's. Are you all right? She laughed, the sound brittle. Define all right. He sat beside her, his hand finding hers. What happened? Clara told him. All of it. The summons, the assembled women, the ultimatum. Adrian's expression grew darker with each word. His jaw setting in that hard line she was learning meant he was furious. They can't force you to do this, he said when she finished. Can't they? Clara pulled her hand free, wrapping her arms around herself. Adrian, they're going to destroy my family. My father will lose everything he's built, and it's my fault, all of it. It's their fault for weaponizing your honesty, for turning natural human expression into something punishable. That doesn't change the result. Clara looked at him, and the pain in her chest felt like it might crack her open. They're right about one thing. I've been selfish. I've prioritized my own need to be seen over everyone who depends on me. That's not selfish. That's survival. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, survival means sacrificing myself to save the people I love, and rebellion means watching them suffer while I cling to my principles. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. If you give in to this, if you let them force you back into that cage, you won't be saving your family. You'll be teaching them that fear and cruelty work, that the only way to survive is to submit. And if I don't give in, they lose everything. They might. Adrian's voice was brutal in its honesty. But they might also discover they're stronger than they think, that they can survive without the approval of people who would destroy them for sport, that there are things worth fighting for, even when the cost is high. Easy for you to say. You're not the one forcing your family into poverty. No, I'm the one who fell in love with a woman brave enough to stand up when everyone else was kneeling. The words hung between them, sharp and electric. And I'll be damned if I watch you break yourself to please people who will never be satisfied. Clara's breath caught. You... what? Adrian's expression softened. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I've loved you since the moment you walked into that ballroom covered in ash and refused to apologize for existing. And I will stand beside you through whatever comes next, whether you choose to fight or surrender. But I'm begging you, don't surrender. Not to them. Tears streamed down Clara's face. I'm so scared. I know. He pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her tight. I'm scared too. But we're scared together, remember? They sat like that as the sun set, two people clinging to each other in the face of impossible choices. Clara thought about the ultimatum, about her family's suffering, about the choice between herself and everyone she loved. And she realized there was a third option, one that terrified her more than either surrender or continued resistance. The grand ball, she said quietly. They want me to make my statement there. Yes. What if I do make a statement, just not the one they expect? Adrian pulled back to look at her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that they've given me a stage, a moment when everyone who matters will be watching. Clara's heart was racing, but her voice steadied. What if instead of apologizing, I tell the truth, the whole truth, about their tactics, their cruelty, their systematic destruction of anyone who threatens their power? What if I expose them? Adrian stared at her. That would be, insane, I know. Clara laughed, wild and reckless. But what do I have to lose? They're going to destroy my family anyway. At least this way I go down fighting. At least I make sure everyone knows what they really are. They'll crucify you. Probably, but maybe if I make enough noise, if I force enough people to see the truth, something will change. Maybe other women will find the courage to speak up. Maybe the system will finally start to crack. She looked up at him, desperate and determined. Or maybe I'll just burn spectacularly and take them down with me. Either way, I'm done being silent. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was fierce and proud and completely terrifying. Then we'd better make it count, he said, because if you're going to set fire to the entire social order, you might as well do it properly. Clara kissed him. It was desperate and necessary and felt like the only honest thing left in a world built on lies. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she felt something lock into place. No more running, no more apologizing, no more trying to fit into spaces that would never accept her. If they wanted a spectacle at the grand ball, she'd give them one, but it would be on her terms, not theirs. 1 week, she whispered. We have 1 week to prepare. Then we'd better get started. Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. Because this is going to be the most dangerous thing either of us has ever done. Clara looked at the darkening sky, at the vast estate spreading before them, at the man who'd chosen to stand beside her despite every rational reason not to. And she felt, for the first time since this whole mess began, something that might have been certainty. She was going to the grand ball. She was going to take the stage they'd offered. And she was going to burn their entire world down. The week before the grand ball moved like a fever dream, fast and disjointed, full of desperate planning and moments where Clara questioned her own sanity. Adrian's study became their war room. Maps of the Ashford estate spread across his desk, guest lists annotated in cramped handwriting, strategies debated and discarded in the small hours of the morning. Elizabeth Thorne arrived on the second day, bringing with her 2 other women who'd been quietly suffering under the same suffocating expectations. Lady Margaret Downing, Elizabeth introduced a red-haired woman in her 30s, and Miss Sarah Chen. Sarah was younger, maybe 22, with sharp eyes and a nervous energy that reminded Clara of herself. "My father is a merchant," she said without preamble. "New money, which means I'm already considered suspect. When I expressed interest in studying medicine, my mother nearly had me committed." "Medicine?" Clara sat forward. "That's incredible. That's unmarriageable, according to Lady Pemberton." Sarah's smile was bitter. "She made sure every family in the county knew I was troubled. My father's business has suffered accordingly." Margaret Downing nodded. "My situation is different but similar. I'm a widow. My husband died 3 years ago. I inherited his estate, and I've been managing it successfully ever since. But Lord Hertford started a rumor that I'm mentally unstable, that a woman couldn't possibly understand land management. He's been trying to force me to sell to him at a fraction of the value." Clara felt something hot and angry coil in her chest. They destroy anyone who threatens their narrative. Exactly. Elizabeth spread documents across the table. Letters, accounts, testimonies. "I've been collecting evidence for months. Every woman they've targeted, every business they've ruined, every reputation they've destroyed. It's all here." Adrian picked up one of the letters, his expression darkening as he read. "This is from Lady Pemberton to the headmistress of Miss Thornberry's academy. She's threatening to withdraw funding unless they expel 3 students for unladylike academic ambition." "She did the same to my sister's school," Sarah said quietly, "when they showed aptitude for mathematics. And here," Margaret pulled out another document. "Lord Hertford's financial records. He's been systematically buying up debt from families with outspoken daughters, then using that debt to force them into compliance or ruin." Clara's hands shook as she sorted through the papers. This wasn't just social pressure. This was organized, systematic oppression. A machine designed to crush anyone who stepped out of line, operated by people who genuinely believed they were protecting civilization. "We need to make this public," she said. "All of it. At the ball." "How?" Elizabeth asked. "Pemberton will control the room. Chum. The moment you deviate from the expected apology, she'll have you removed." "Not if we control the narrative first." Adrian had been quiet, studying the documents with intense focus. Now he looked up, his eyes sharp. "What if we don't wait for Clara to be given the floor? What if we take it?" "Take it how?" Clara asked. "The ball opens with a reception line. Every guest is announced as they enter. It's tradition. The host can't refuse it without causing offense." Adrian's smile turned sharp. "What if we use that announcement to our advantage?" Sarah leaned forward. "You mean announce ourselves in a way that forces the issue?" "Exactly. And once we have everyone's attention, we don't let go." Adrian looked at Clara. "But it has to be you. It has to come from someone they've tried to destroy, someone who refuses to stay broken." Clara's heart hammered. "I'm terrified." "Good." Margaret's voice was firm. "Fear means you understand the stakes." "But Clara, I've read these documents. I've seen what they've done to dozens of women across 3 counties. If we don't stop this now, it will keep happening. The next Sarah, the next Elizabeth, the next you, they'll all be crushed before they even understand what's happening to them." The weight of that settled over Clara like a mantle. This wasn't just about her anymore. It had never been just about her. "Then we do it," she said. "But we need a backup plan. If they shut us down before we can finish—" "They won't," Adrian's voice was certain. "Because I'm making an announcement of my own that night, one they can't ignore or suppress." Clara looked at him sharply. "What kind of announcement?" His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "The kind that makes it impossible for them to dismiss you as a lone troublemaker. But we'll discuss that later. Right now, we need to prepare your statement." The next 3 days were brutal. Clara wrote and rewrote her speech, trying to find words that would cut through years of conditioning and denial. Adrian brought in a voice coach to help her project without shouting. Elizabeth drilled her on maintaining composure under attack. "They'll try to rattle you," Elizabeth said during one of their practice sessions. "Pemberton especially. She'll interrupt, she'll mock, she'll try to make you lose your temper." "So what do I do?" "You stay calm. You speak the truth clearly and without apology. And you remember that every moment they're attacking you, they're proving your point." Clara practiced in front of the mirror until her reflection looked like a stranger, hard-eyed and determined, Nothing like the woman who'd hidden in her room just weeks ago. Her family didn't know what she was planning. Clara had gone home only once since the meeting at Pemberton's estate, and the visit had been disastrous. Her father wouldn't speak to her. Her mother moved through the house like a ghost. Even Beatrice seemed distant, caught between loyalty to Clara and fury at the consequences. "Are you going to apologize?" Beatrice had asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm going to the ball," Clara had replied. "What happens there? We'll see." Now, the night before the event, Clara stood in Adrian's study staring at her final draft. The words looked inadequate, too small to capture the scope of what she was trying to say, but they were true. And truth, she was learning, had its own kind of power. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Adrian entered carrying 2 glasses of wine. "You should rest," he said, handing her one. "Tomorrow will be exhausting." "I can't rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see it going wrong. I see them laughing at me, dismissing everything, destroying what's left of my family." "Clara." Adrian set down his glass and took her hands. "Look at me." She did. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you won't be alone. I'll be there. Elizabeth will be there. Margaret and Sarah will be there. We're all walking into that ballroom together, and we're all prepared to face the consequences together." "You shouldn't have to face consequences. You could still walk away." "I could." His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. "But I won't." "Do you know why?" Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Because watching you find your courage has been the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed. Because you've reminded me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. And because—" He paused, his expression turning vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Because I meant what I said last week. I love you, Clara. And I'm not letting you face this alone." Tears burned in Clara's eyes. "What if I fail?" "Then we fail together and figure out what comes next." Adrian pulled her closer. "But I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to walk into that ballroom and change everything." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the certainty that seemed to come so easily to him. But all she felt was fear, sharp and overwhelming and completely paralyzing. "I don't know if I'm brave enough," she whispered. "You are." Adrian's voice was absolutely certain. "You've been brave your whole life, Clara. You just never had permission to show it. Tomorrow, you give yourself that permission, and the rest of us will stand behind you and make sure everyone listens." Clara kissed him then, desperate and grateful and terrified. He kissed her back like she was something precious, like she mattered more than titles or reputations or the entire social order they were about to challenge. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt something shift inside her. Not confidence exactly, but something close to it, a kind of resigned determination. "Tomorrow," she said, "we burn it all down." Adrian smiled. "Tomorrow." The Ashford estate blazed with light as Clara's carriage approached. Every window glowed gold, and the sound of music drifted across the manicured lawns. Carriages lined the drive, hundreds of them, carrying every important family in the region. Clara's hands twisted in the fabric of her gown. She'd chosen green again, deeper this time, with minimal ornamentation, a dress that said she wasn't performing anymore. "You look beautiful," Elizabeth said from across the carriage. She'd insisted on riding with Clara, refusing to let her face the approach alone. "And terrifying. It's a good combination. I feel like I'm going to vomit." "That's normal." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "Just remember, the moment we step out of this carriage, everything changes. There's no going back." "I know." The carriage stopped. A servant opened the door and Clara stepped out into chaos. She'd expected stares, whispers, maybe some poorly concealed contempt. What she hadn't expected was the wall of people blocking the entrance. Lady Pemberton stood at the center, flanked by a dozen influential women, all dressed in white like some kind of coordinated statement. "Miss Whitmore," Pemberton's voice carried across the drive. "How unexpected to see you here." "Is it?" Clara forced herself to walk forward, Elizabeth beside her. "Your summons was quite clear about my attendance being required." "For your apology, yes, but I see you've brought an entourage instead of contrition." Pemberton's eyes slid to Elizabeth. "Lady Elizabeth, I'm surprised to see you associating with such questionable company. I'm surprised you think you have the authority to dictate my friendships." Elizabeth replied coolly. A ripple of shock went through the assembled crowd. You didn't speak to Lady Pemberton like that. Not if you valued your place in society. But Elizabeth just smiled, sharp and unapologetic. Ladies, another voice, male and commanding. Adrian appeared from inside the ballroom, descending the steps with the kind of authority that made people instinctively move aside. I believe the receiving line is about to begin. We wouldn't want to keep the hosts waiting. Pemberton's expression tightened. Your Grace, I wasn't aware you'd arrived. I came early to ensure the evening runs smoothly. Adrian's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, if you'll excuse us, Miss Whitmore and I have an announcement to make. An announcement? Pemberton's voice rose slightly. What kind of... But Adrian was already offering his arm to Clara, already leading her past the wall of white-dressed women who couldn't actually physically stop them without causing a scene. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must hear it. This was it, the point of no return. They entered the ballroom, and conversation died like someone had cut the strings on a puppet. Every head turned. Every eye focused on Clara Whitmore, the woman they'd tried to destroy, walking in on the Duke's arm like she belonged there. The receiving line formed. Lord and Lady Ashford stood at the front, their expressions frozen in polite confusion. The herald stepped forward to announce the guests. Adrian leaned close to Clara, his breath warm against her ear. Ready? No. Perfect. Neither am I. He straightened, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Before the formal announcements begin, I have something to say. Lord Ashford's face went red. Your Grace, this is highly irregular. It's necessary. Adrian's voice cut through the protest. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you tonight to address the systematic destruction of Miss Clara Whitmore's reputation and her family's livelihood. What has been called social consequences is actually organized cruelty. What has been framed as protecting standards is actually crushing anyone who threatens the power structure of a select few. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Lady Pemberton pushed through the crowd, her face white with fury. Your Grace, I must object. Object all you want, Lady Pemberton, but everyone here is going to hear the truth. Adrian pulled papers from his coat, copies of the evidence they'd gathered, including the truth about your Society Protection Committee and the deliberate campaign of financial and social warfare you've waged against dozens of women across 3 counties. Pemberton's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Clara felt Elizabeth press something into her hand, her own speech, the one they'd practiced for days. But suddenly, looking at the assembled crowd, at the shock and confusion and dawning realization on their faces, Clara realized she didn't need a prepared statement. She just needed the truth. I was 17 when I first realized I was wrong, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Wrong for being smart. Wrong for having opinions. Wrong for existing in ways that made men uncomfortable. So I spent 8 years trying to fix myself, trying to be smaller, quieter, less, and it nearly killed me. The room was dead silent now, everyone straining to hear. Then one night, I decided to stop trying. I walked into a ballroom as myself, messy and honest and imperfect. And that decision set off a chain reaction, because it turns out that women being themselves is threatening. It suggests that maybe we don't need their approval to exist. Maybe we're allowed to take up space and have thoughts, and refuse to apologize for being human. This is absurd, Pemberton tried to interrupt, but Clara kept talking, her voice growing stronger. So they came after me. And when that didn't work, they came after my family, my father's business, my mother's social standing, my cousin's engagement, all of it destroyed because I refused to pretend anymore. Clara looked directly at Pemberton. You call it protecting society. I call it terrorism. And I'm done being terrorized. How dare you? Pemberton started forward, but Adrian stepped between them. She dares because she's telling the truth. Something I suspect everyone in this room has needed to hear for a very long time. He turned to address the crowd. How many of you have daughters who've been told they're too smart? Sisters who've been punished for having ambitions beyond marriage? Wives who've had to hide their capabilities to avoid threatening their husbands? Silence. But Clara saw it. The flicker of recognition on faces throughout the ballroom, women looking at each other, men shifting uncomfortably. You're manipulating them, Pemberton hissed, turning a personal grievance into some kind of moral crusade. No. A new voice, unexpected. The Duchess of Kellington stepped forward from the crowd, her aged face set in hard lines. He's stating facts we've all been too comfortable to acknowledge. Pemberton spun toward her. Your Grace, surely you don't... I've been part of this society for 50 years, Pemberton. I've watched it crush some of the brightest women I've known. I've participated in that crushing because it was easier than fighting. The Duchess looked at Clara. But I'm tired. Tired of pretending that compliance equals virtue. Tired of watching potential be wasted because we're too afraid of change. This is ridiculous. Lord Hertford pushed through the crowd. You can't possibly be taking their side. The girl is unstable. The Duke is clearly infatuated beyond reason. And you, Hertford, are terrified. Sarah Chen's voice rang out. She stood at the edge of the crowd, papers in hand. Because if women are allowed to manage property and make financial decisions, what happens to men like you who've built entire careers on exploiting their legal vulnerability? Hertford's face went purple. Who are you to I'm one of the women you've tried to silence. Sarah moved forward, her fear evident but her voice steady. And I have documentation of every shady land deal, every manipulated debt, every family you've financially destroyed to maintain your power. She handed the papers to Adrian, who began reading aloud. With each revelation, each name, each amount, each deliberate cruelty, the crowd's mood shifted. Shock turned to understanding, understanding to anger. This is slander, Hertford shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. It's public record, Margaret Downing called out, appearing with her own stack of documents. Available to anyone willing to look. We've just done the looking for you. The ballroom descended into chaos. Voices rose in argument, accusations flew, alliances that had seemed solid began to fracture. And in the center of it all stood Clara, watching the machine of oppression finally start to come apart. Pemberton grabbed her arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You've destroyed everything, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? Clara looked her in the eye. I've told the truth. The fact that it's destroying your power structure says more about you than it does about me. You foolish girl! Pemberton's composure finally cracked. You think this changes anything? You think one dramatic speech will undo centuries of social order? By tomorrow, this will all be forgotten. You'll still be a pariah, your family will still be ruined, and I will make certain you never set foot in polite society again. Then I suppose it's fortunate that I don't want to be part of polite society anymore. Clara pulled her arm free. Not if polite means cruel. Not if society means crushing anyone who refuses to perform. She turned to face the crowd, her voice rising above the chaos. Anyone who wants to keep living like this, keep pretending, keep breaking themselves to fit impossible standards, you're welcome to it. But for anyone who's tired of the performance, tired of the lies, tired of being less than what you are, she looked at Elizabeth, at Sarah, at Margaret, at the Duchess. There's another way. It's harder. It's messier. But it's real. And I'm choosing real. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then someone started clapping. Just one person, somewhere in the back. Then another. Then more, the applause spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Not everyone, Pemberton and her faction stood silent and furious. But enough. Enough women with tears streaming down their faces. Enough men who looked like they'd finally understood something they'd been refusing to see. Enough people willing to consider that maybe things could be different. Adrian's hand found Clara's, squeezing tight. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. Clara looked around at the chaos she'd created, at Pemberton's rage, at Hertford's panic, at the fracturing of social order that had seemed so unbreakable, and she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. It wasn't over. Pemberton was right about that. One speech wouldn't undo everything. There would be consequences, retaliation, years of fighting ahead. But the machine had cracked. The first real crack in a structure that had seemed indestructible. We did it, she corrected, looking up at Adrian. Together. He smiled, and it was real and unguarded and completely beautiful. Together. Pemberton recovered first, her voice cutting through the applause. This isn't over, Miss Whitmore. You've made powerful enemies tonight. Actually, Adrian interrupted, pulling another document from his coat. There's one more announcement I need to make. He turned to address the crowd. As of this evening, I am formally petitioning the Queen for permission to marry Miss Clara Whitmore. The ballroom went absolutely silent. Clara's head whipped toward him. What? I've already filed the papers. Received preliminary approval this afternoon. Adrian's eyes held hers, intense and certain. I told you I wouldn't let you face this alone, Clara. I meant it. Every word. But your reputation, your political position, mean nothing without you. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I love you. I choose you, and I want everyone in this room to know it. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The entire ballroom was staring at them, but all she could see was Adrian, this impossible man who'd decided she was worth fighting for, worth standing beside, worth loving. Say yes, Elizabeth urged from somewhere nearby. Say yes, the Duchess echoed, her old voice warm with approval. Clara looked at Adrian, at this man who'd given her permission to be herself, who'd stood beside her when it would have been easier to walk away. And she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes! The ballroom erupted again, this time in genuine celebration mixed with scandal. Pemberton looked like she might actually faint. Hartford was already pushing toward the exit, probably to begin damage control. But Clara didn't care, because Adrian was kissing her in front of everyone, publicly claiming her in a way that made denial or dismissal impossible. And she was kissing him back, no longer worried about appearances or propriety or what anyone thought. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara turned to face the crowd one more time. So, she said, her voice carrying across the chaos, who else is tired of pretending? The response wasn't universal, but it was significant. Women stepping forward, men looking thoughtful, the old certainties starting to crumble. And in that moment, standing in the ruins of the world that had tried to destroy her, Clara Whitmore understood something fundamental. Change didn't happen all at once. It happened in moments like this, when someone finally said the quiet part loud, and enough people were ready to listen. The battle wasn't won, but for the first time it felt winnable. The morning after the grand ball, Clara woke to find her name in every newspaper in London. Whitmore scandal erupts at Ashford Ball, declared the Times. Duke Blackthorne defends controversial woman in shocking display, proclaimed the Herald. But it was the Chronicle's headline that made Clara's hands shake. Society faces reckoning as documents expose systematic oppression. She sat in Adrian's library. She'd stayed at his estate overnight, propriety be damned, and read through article after article. Some were sympathetic, praising her courage. Others were vicious, calling her a troublemaker and Adrian a fool. But all of them were talking. The silence had been broken, and there was no putting it back. Coffee? Adrian appeared in the doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. He looked tired, lines around his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as she had. Please. Clara accepted the cup gratefully. Have you seen these? Every one. He settled into the chair beside her. My solicitor arrived at dawn. Apparently several families are threatening legal action over the documents we presented last night. Clara's stomach dropped. Legal action? Empty threats, mostly. Hartford's particularly upset, but he'd have to admit the accuracy of the information to sue, which would be worse for him than letting it go. Adrian's smile was grim. Pemberton sent a letter demanding I retract my marriage petition. Said if I don't, she'll convince the Queen to block it. Can she do that? She can try, but Her Majesty already gave preliminary approval, and she doesn't appreciate being pressured. He took a sip of his own coffee. We've created quite a mess, Clara. Regret it yet? Adrian's hand found hers across the table. Not for a second. A knock at the door interrupted them. Adrian's butler entered, looking flustered. Your Grace, there's a situation at the front gate. What kind of situation? People, sir. Dozens of them. Some are reporters, but others... The butler hesitated. Others claim they want to speak with Miss Whitmore. They say she's inspired them. Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. They moved to the window overlooking the drive, and Clara's breath caught. The butler hadn't exaggerated. At least 40 people crowded the gates, some clutching newspapers, others holding hastily made signs. As Clara watched, a young woman broke free from the group and approached the guards. "We should go down," Clara said. "Clara, it might not be safe." "They're not here to hurt me." She recognized that desperate hope on their faces. She'd worn it herself not long ago. "They're here because they need to know they're not alone." Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Together?" "Always." They descended to the front gates, and the crowd surged forward. The guards tensed, but Adrian waved them back. "Miss Whitmore!" A woman in a plain dress pushed to the front. "I read what you said last night, about being punished for being smart. That's exactly what happened to me. My husband's family forced me to give up teaching because they said it was inappropriate." "My father won't let me attend university," another voice called out. "Says women studying is unnatural, but I want to learn. I want to understand things beyond embroidery and etiquette." "I was dismissed from my position for questioning my employer's accounting practices," a man added, surprising Clara, "because apparently women aren't supposed to understand mathematics well enough to catch fraud." More voices joined in, each telling a story of suppression, of potential crushed, of being forced to be less than they were. Clara listened to all of them, her heart breaking and rebuilding with each confession. "I can't fix this overnight," she finally said, her voice carrying across the assembled group. "I can't undo years of conditioning or change the entire social structure with one speech. But I can promise you this, I won't stop fighting, and neither should you." "But how?" the teacher asked. "How do we fight when they have all the power?" "By refusing to be silent," Elizabeth's voice came from behind them. She'd arrived with Sarah and Margaret, the three of them looking determined despite their obvious exhaustion. "By documenting every injustice, every deliberate cruelty, every time they try to crush us for being ourselves, and by standing together instead of letting them isolate us." "We're starting a newsletter," Sarah announced, holding up a sheaf of papers. "Stories from women who've been suppressed, evidence of systematic discrimination, legal resources for those fighting back. If anyone wants to contribute—" "I do," several voices called out. "Me too. I have documents about my employer." The crowd dissolved into animated conversation, people exchanging names and stories, the energy shifting from desperation to something that looked almost like hope. Clara felt Adrian's hand on her shoulder. "You've started something," he murmured, "something that's going to be very difficult to stop." "Good." A carriage approached through the crowd, and Clara's chest tightened when she recognized the Whitmore family crest. The vehicle stopped, and her father stepped out. Thomas Whitmore looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His face was drawn, his clothes rumpled, and when his eyes found Clara's, the pain in them was almost unbearable. "Father," Clara started, but he held up a hand. "I read the papers, all of them." His voice was rough. "And then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I actually listened. To your mother, to Beatrice, to the servants who've been whispering in corners about how the local merchants have been treating us. I listened." Clara waited, barely breathing. "You were right." The words seemed to cost him. "About everything. I was so focused on maintaining appearances, on preserving what I'd built, that I couldn't see how poisonous the foundation was, how much it was costing you to live according to their rules." "Father, let me finish." Thomas moved closer, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "When you walked into that ballroom last night and told the truth, you did what I should have done years ago. You protected your family by refusing to let them be destroyed slowly, piece by piece, by people who claimed to be protecting us." He took a shaky breath. "I'm proud of you, Clara, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." Clara's own tears spilled over. She closed the distance between them, and her father pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "You almost did. I almost let my pride and fear cost me my daughter." He pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "But I'm here now, and whatever comes next, whatever consequences we face for standing with you, we face them together, as a family." The carriage door opened again, and Margaret Whitmore stepped out, followed by Beatrice. Both women looked tired but resolute. "The house is in chaos," Margaret said without preamble. "Half our former friends are denouncing us. The other half are secretly asking how they can help." She smiled, watery but genuine. "It's wonderful and terrifying." Beatrice hugged Clara tightly. "Lord Hartley sent a letter this morning, begging me to reconsider, claiming he'd been pressured by his mother. She pulled back, her eyes bright. I told him to go to hell. Quite satisfying, actually. Beatrice, Margaret gasped, but she was smiling. What? Clara gets to be honest, but I have to remain polite? Beatrice grinned. I'm done with polite. Polite was killing me. The crowd around them had grown quiet, watching this family reunion with open interest. Clara saw recognition on many faces. They understood what it meant for her father to publicly support her, what it cost, and what it signified. Your Grace, Thomas turned to Adrian. I owe you an apology as well. You tried to protect my family when I was too stubborn to see we needed protection. Thank you. Adrian inclined his head. No thanks necessary. I love your daughter. Protecting her means protecting all of you. About that love. Thomas's expression turned serious. Under normal circumstances, I'd demand a proper courtship period, chaperone visits, all the traditional protocols. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they? No, sir. Then I'll simply say this. If you hurt her, Duke, or not, I will find a way to make you regret it. Are we clear? Adrian's smile was genuine. Perfectly clear, sir, and I have no intention of giving you that opportunity. A commotion at the far end of the drive drew everyone's attention. Another carriage approached, this one bearing the royal crest. The crowd parted, whispers rising. A royal messenger stepped out, his expression carefully neutral. Miss Clara Whitmore? Yes? Clara's heart hammered. Her Majesty requests your presence at the palace, immediately. The crowd went silent. A royal summons delivered publicly could mean anything from honor to arrest. I'll accompany her, Adrian said immediately. Her Majesty was quite specific, Your Grace. Miss Whitmore. Alone. Adrian's jaw tightened, but Clara squeezed his hand. It's all right. Clara, I have to do this myself. She looked at her family, at Elizabeth and the others, at the crowd of people who'd come seeking hope. I'll be fine. She didn't know if that was true, but she climbed into the royal carriage anyway, and as they pulled away, she watched her small army grow smaller in the distance. What? The Queen's private study was different from the receiving room Clara had visited before. Smaller, more personal, filled with books and papers that suggested this was where actual work happened rather than ceremonial appearances. Queen Victoria sat behind a massive desk, reading through documents. She didn't look up as Clara was announced, just gestured to a chair. Sit. Clara sat. The Queen continued reading for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, she set the papers aside and fixed Clara with that piercing stare. You've caused quite a disruption, Miss Whitmore. Yes, Your Majesty. Lord Hertford is demanding I intervene. Lady Pemberton has written 3 separate letters insisting you be barred from court permanently. Even some of my own advisors think you've gone too far. The Queen's expression was unreadable. What do you have to say for yourself? Clara took a breath. I'd say that disruption was necessary, Your Majesty. That sometimes systems need to be shaken before they can change. And you think you've changed our system with one dramatic speech? No, but I think I've started a conversation that needed to happen about who gets power, who gets silenced, and whether the cost of social order is worth what we're sacrificing to maintain it. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Do you know what I've been doing this morning, Miss Whitmore? No, Your Majesty. Reading letters, dozens of them arriving by the hour. Some denouncing you, certainly, but others— She pulled a stack from her desk. Others thanking you for saying what they'd been afraid to say, for proving they weren't wrong to want more than what society offered them. Clara's breath caught. I told you before that I've made compromises for the sake of stability, that I've participated in systems I knew were unjust because changing them seemed impossible. The Queen stood, moving to the window. But I'm old, Miss Whitmore. And when I look at my legacy, I don't want it to be that I maintained the status quo. I want it to be that I opened doors that had been closed for generations. Your Majesty, what are you saying? I'm saying that I'm approving your marriage to the Duke of Blackthorn, publicly, enthusiastically, in a way that makes it clear this union has royal support. She turned back to face Clara. and I'm establishing a royal commission to investigate the systematic discrimination you've exposed. Lord Hertford, Lady Pemberton, and anyone else involved in what you've documented will be held accountable. Clara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. You're taking our side? I'm taking the side of justice, which, it turns out, occasionally aligns with the side of disruptive young women who refuse to be silent. The Queen's smile turned wry. Don't look so shocked. Did you think your speech was the only thing that happened last night? What else happened? After you left the ball, several other women came forward with their own stories. The Duchess of Kellington revealed that she'd been forced to sign over control of her estate to male relatives when her husband died, despite being perfectly capable of managing it herself. Lady Margaret Downing presented evidence of fraudulent land acquisitions. Even some men spoke up about the pressure to maintain impossible standards. The Queen returned to her desk. You didn't just crack the system, Miss Whitmore. You shattered it. And now we have to decide what to build in its place. Clara's hands were shaking. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help. The Queen's expression turned serious. This commission will need testimony, evidence, voices willing to speak truth even when it's difficult. You've proven you have that courage. I'm asking you to continue using it. Of course. Yes, whatever you need. Good. The Queen shuffled papers. Now, about your wedding. I assume the Duke will want something grand? Clara blinked at the sudden shift. We haven't really discussed. Well, discuss it. And make it public. I want everyone to see that merit and courage matter more than performing compliance. The Queen's eyes gleamed with something that looked almost mischievous. Besides, it will infuriate Lady Pemberton, which I'm finding surprisingly satisfying. Despite everything, Clara laughed. The Queen of England was taking pleasure in antagonizing the same women who'd tried to destroy Clara. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. One more thing, the Queen said as Clara stood to leave. What you did took extraordinary courage, but courage isn't sustainable without support. Don't try to carry this alone. Build your community, trust your allies, and remember that change is a marathon, not a sprint. I'll remember, Your Majesty. See that you do. The Queen's expression softened slightly. And Miss Whitmore, thank you for reminding an old woman that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Check. The wedding happened 6 weeks later, on a spring day when the sky was impossibly blue and the flowers were just beginning to bloom. True to her word, the Queen made it a public spectacle. Invitations went to everyone who'd supported Clara at the ball, plus dozens of women who'd come forward with their own stories in the weeks since. Notably absent were the Pembertons, the Hertfords, and anyone else who'd been implicated in the Commission's investigation. Clara stood in the preparation room, staring at herself in the mirror. Her dress was simpler than most ducal weddings demanded, cream silk with minimal ornamentation, designed to let her breathe instead of compressing her into immobility. You look beautiful, Beatrice said, adjusting Clara's veil, and terrified. Still normal? Still normal. Clara's hands twisted in her skirt. Is this real? Am I actually about to marry Adrian? Unless he's changed his mind in the last 10 minutes, yes. Elizabeth smiled from the doorway. Though I should mention there's a crowd outside that's tripled since this morning. Word spread that this is the wedding where women are allowed to attend without male escorts. Half of London's going to be there, Sarah added, appearing with Margaret Downing. Both women had become fixtures in Clara's life over the past weeks, helping organize the commission testimonies and building what they were calling the Women's Truth Society. No pressure, Clara laughed, slightly hysterical. None at all. Her mother entered, looking elegant in deep blue. The cathedral is ready. Your father is waiting to escort you. And Clara... Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I'm so proud of who you've become. Who you've always been, actually. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see it. You're seeing it now. That's what matters. Clara hugged her tightly. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? You're my daughter. My brilliant, courageous, impossible daughter. The walk to the cathedral was a blur. Clara remembered her father's arm steady under her hand, remembered the roar of the crowd lining the streets, remembered flowers thrown from windows and women crying openly as she passed. Then she was inside, and the cathedral stretched before her, vast and ancient and filled to capacity. every pew packed with people who'd come to witness not just a wedding, but a statement. And at the end of the aisle stood Adrian, looking at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Clara walked toward him, each step feeling like a choice. Not just to marry him, but to choose this life, this public, scrutinized, constantly challenging life where she'd never be allowed to fade into the background. But she'd never wanted to fade. She'd just needed permission to shine. "Hi," she whispered when she reached him. "Hi yourself." Adrian's smile was crooked, vulnerable. "Ready to make this official? Ready to cause more scandals together, you mean?" Exactly that. The ceremony was traditional in structure, but revolutionary in spirit. The Archbishop spoke about partnership rather than obedience, about mutual respect rather than wifely submission. When it came time for vows, Adrian had insisted they write their own. "Clara Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying across the silent cathedral, "I promise to stand beside you, not above you, to challenge you when you're wrong and support you when you're right, to never ask you to be less than you are, and to love you exactly as you are, brilliant, stubborn, impossibly brave, and completely irreplaceable." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "Adrian Blackthorne, I promise to be honest even when it's difficult, to fight beside you for the things that matter, to remind you that power means nothing if it's not used for justice, and to love you not despite the chaos we've created, but because of it." When they kissed, the cathedral erupted in applause. Not polite golf claps, but genuine, thunderous celebration. The reception was held at Adrian's estate, transformed for the occasion into something between a political rally and a massive family gathering. The Women's Truth Society had a table displaying their newsletter and collecting testimonies. Sarah had organized a petition for university admission reforms. The Duchess of Kellington held court in one corner, dispensing advice to younger women about navigating male-dominated business environments. Clara moved through it all in a daze, accepting congratulations and promises of support, watching her impossible dream take shape in real time. "Quite a party," a familiar voice said. Clara turned to find her father, glass of champagne in hand. "It's chaos." "It's wonderful." Thomas smiled, genuine and warm. "Your mother and I have been talking about the future, about what we want to do with the rest of our lives, now that we're not beholden to Pemberton's approval. And we think we'd like to use our resources differently. Your mother wants to establish a school for girls focused on mathematics and sciences. I'd like to restructure my business to prioritize fair wages and working conditions over maximum profit." He paused. "We'd like your input, if you're willing." Clara hugged him fiercely. "Of course I'm willing." As the afternoon wore into evening, Clara found herself on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The party continued inside, but she needed a moment to breathe, to process the magnitude of what her life had become. Adrian found her there, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Escaping your own wedding?" "Just catching my breath." She leaned back against him. "Did this really happen? Did we actually win?" "We started winning," Adrian corrected. "The Commission's investigation will take months. Pemberton and Hartford have powerful allies who will fight back. Changing centuries of social structure doesn't happen overnight." "I know, but Adrian, look." Clara gestured toward the ballroom windows. Inside, women were laughing freely, debating politics without fear, existing in ways they'd never been allowed before. Something fundamental has shifted. They can feel it. I can feel it. "You did that. You walked into a ballroom and refused to apologize, and everything changed. We did that. All of us." Clara turned in his arms. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." "You shouldn't have had to." Adrian's expression turned serious. "I love you, Clara Blackthorne. Duchess of Blackthorne, if you want the title. But more importantly, you're Clara, the woman who set fire to the entire social order because she was tired of pretending. Never stop being that woman." "Never stop being the man who let me," Clara replied. They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Inside, the party raged on. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the Commission's work, the social backlash, the endless fight to maintain what they'd started. But tonight, surrounded by people who'd chosen truth over performance, Clara felt something she'd never quite experienced before. Peace. 1 year later, Clara stood in a newly built lecture hall, addressing a room full of young women enrolled in the Whitmore Academy for Advanced Studies. "The society you inherit is different from the one I grew up in," she told them. "More honest, more open, more willing to acknowledge that half the population has been systematically suppressed. But it's not fixed. It won't be fixed in your lifetime, or maybe even in your children's lifetimes. Change is slow and incomplete and constantly threatened by people who prefer the old, comfortable lies." She paused, looking at their young faces, hopeful, determined, scared. "But here's what I've learned. You don't need permission to be yourself. You don't need society's approval to take up space, to have opinions, to exist in ways that make others uncomfortable. You just need courage, and you need each other." After the lecture, Clara walked across the grounds toward the administrative building where Sarah now worked full-time coordinating curriculum. The academy had started with 12 students. Now, a year in, they had over 80, with a waiting list twice that long. Adrian met her at the entrance, carrying their infant daughter. Little Margaret, named for both the Duchess of Kellington and Clara's mother, gurgled happily in his arms. "How was the lecture?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Terrifying and exhilarating. The usual." Clara took the baby, inhaling that sweet infant smell. "Did the commission's report come through?" "This morning, Hartford's being formally censured and stripped of several appointments. Pemberton's lost her position on 3 charitable boards. It's not everything we wanted, but it's a start." "It's more than anyone thought possible a year ago." They walked together across the grounds, past students debating philosophy and mathematics, past the new library funded by donations from women across the country who'd read Clara's story and wanted to contribute. This wasn't the life Clara had imagined at 17, crushed under the weight of impossible expectations. But it was better. Messier, more complicated, infinitely more real. "Do you ever miss it?" Adrian asked quietly. "The simplicity of before, when the biggest worry was which dress to wear to which ball?" Clara considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the safety of invisibility, the ease of just following the rules instead of constantly fighting them." She looked at her daughter, at the academy grounds, at the evidence of everything they'd built. "But I don't miss who I was when I was trying to be invisible. That woman was slowly dying. And now? Now I'm alive, exhausted, frequently terrified, constantly questioning if we're doing enough. But alive," she smiled at him. "Worth it? Every impossible second." Margaret fussed in Clara's arms, and they turned back toward the house. The estate that had become less a symbol of aristocratic power and more a hub for the growing movement toward equality and justice. As they walked, Clara thought about the girl she'd been, standing in front of her mirror, smudging ash on her face. That desperate act of sabotage had seemed like an ending at the time, a final surrender to the impossibility of fitting into spaces that weren't meant for her. Instead, it had been a beginning, the beginning of understanding that she didn't need to fit, that the spaces themselves were wrong, not her, that breaking the mold wasn't failure, it was revolution. Inside the house, Elizabeth and Beatrice were already waiting, along with Margaret Downing and half a dozen other women from the Truth Society. They met every week now, documenting new cases of discrimination, strategizing about legislative changes, supporting each other through the ongoing battle. "Ready to change the world again?" Elizabeth asked, grinning. Clara settled into her seat, her daughter in her arms, her husband beside her, her friends and allies surrounding her. Outside, the academy grounds buzzed with young women learning they were allowed to be brilliant. Beyond that, a society slowly, painfully learning to accommodate truth instead of performance. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. There were still daily battles, still people who resented the changes, still moments when Clara wondered if they'd bitten off more than they could ever hope to chew. But it was real. And real, Clara had learned, was worth fighting for. "Always," she said, smiling at the assembled group. "Let's get to work." And they did.